Hi there. Just before we get started, a content warning. There is mentions of infant loss and miscarriage. If anybody listening finds this upsetting, please do see the description for some links to some help and support services that you can access. Thank you for listening. The aim of the show is to get to know, explore and celebrate the diverse and intersectional range of people on this rock we call home and their love and passions of it. We'll find out why guests identify as geographers, and if they don't exactly, we'll have fun exploring all the myriad of ways that connects their life to geography. So, pour your favourite brew, get cosy and listen in. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at CoffeeJogPod. Off we go. Hello everybody, and at time of recording we are now into June. It is the 1st of June, so pinch punch first day of the month and all that nonsense. I am joined by a good friend of mine, a geography teacher, secondary geography teacher, Hina Robinson. Hello Hina.
Hello.
Hello, it's lovely to see you.
And hear you, yes.
And hear you too. Have you been, so it's, for everyone listening who doesn't know, it's what we call half-term break or a mid-semester break if you're elsewhere, not in the UK. And so Hina has been hopefully enjoying some time off, quote-unquote time off. So how's your week been going so far? I hope you've been getting some R&R in.
Oh, yeah, definitely a week off. We've been doing an activity holiday. So done stuff like wall climbing, trapeze, I chickened out on the zip wire, archery, that kind of thing so far. So yeah, properly away from work.
Putting me to shame, because like still like the kids and I and the family were just kind of like still kind of milling around our hometown at the moment, haven't really got anywhere too ambitious, but hey ho. So I'm pretty jealous of you. It sounds pretty cool. So Hina is a secondary geography teacher with various responsibilities. She is a mum to 2 girls plus 2 angels, passionate about geography and getting everyone to listen and act on how it can change the world. Soon to be on the board of the UK's Geographical Association and also a chair of a primary school governing body. Now, organising all aspects of life apart from at home, she says, always need more sleep, loves trying out new crafts and things and reading when you have time. So 2 angels. Please tell us a little bit about that, Hina.
So I've got 2 girls, but before my 2 girls were born, I unfortunately lost twin boys. So I always say that I'm a mum of 4 because they are angels. I gave birth to them naturally, so I've held them, etc. So they are 2 angels. But I think it's really important to talk about it because there's so many people that have gone through miscarriage or baby loss, and some people that think it's a taboo subject, and it's not. So I'm quite open about the fact that it happened to me, and it actually shapes who I am a little bit because I'm so much stronger having gone through that.
Yeah.
And they are part of my life, even though they didn't come home. So I always say I'm a mum of 4.
And how old would they be now?
So they'd be 13.
13.
Yeah.
Have you got that picture in your head about what they would be like right now? Have they got that kind of morphing into Kevin the teenager kind of thing?
Oh, they'd be proper little monkeys. They'd be, assuming they had one of their sisters, they'd be terrorising them, I'm pretty certain. Yeah.
I don't know. I think the sisters could probably hold their own, given that I've got a younger sister. Yeah. No, Hina, that's absolutely... Thank you so much for sharing that with us all. And my family has also have had losses as well. We've been through some miscarriages and one ectopic pregnancy as well. So it is really, really, it can be quite traumatic at the time, but you're absolutely right. It's something that does happen. It's part of the natural order of the world, and the more of us talk about it and understand, and the the better for everybody, really. And we keep thinking to ourselves that, if things didn't play out the way that they played out, we wouldn't have the precious children we do right now. So
exactly.
It's the way the world works, and we know that we're very, very lucky, and we understand that life is precious in that manner. So I do appreciate you sharing that, Hina. Thank you. You mentioned that you kind of like to pick up some crafts and stuff. So is there anything that you've been up to recently with your crafting or anything like that?
So Easter holidays, I taught
crochet. Yep.
I thought that went quite well. So yeah, crochet at the moment. That's the latest one. So much so that I've volunteered to do enrichment with the year six the sixth form induction, crochet sessions then as well, which is a bit brave of me because I've only just learnt myself. But diamond painting recently as well. Paper cutting inspired by Rob Chambers, another geographer, because he does some really good paper cutting. So inspired by that to do that. Cross stitch, yeah. I'll try my hand at most things. I like making front door wreaths, so I've got one for each season almost now.
Yeah, why do they have to only be for Christmas?
Yeah, no, I've got one on my front door now. It's spring summery. Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah, well, not just for that one holiday that not everybody in the world celebrates, but, for every single type of holiday.
Exactly.
You can have a wreath for every special event.
Makes your door really pretty. I really like it. So, yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm going to have to talk to you about that a bit later when we're quote-unquote off air. I know we're not live, but, I just want to sound professional. So, Hina, we've named this podcast Coffee and Geography because not only are we talking about geography, but we try to map our brews and beverages so listeners can have a little investigation of just one of the countless ways we're interconnected around the world. So what is the brew you have with you?
Right, while I do love coffee, this particular one is a Whittard Dreamtime tea. It's flavours of honey, apricot and vanilla, and it's like a bedtime drink, but I just find it really soothing, and it tastes lovely. So it's my favourite, but I can't have it all day long. It's just one of those go-to when you need a bit of comfort drinks.
Wait, I used to be into those. Is that where you get them in the tin and they're like powder, basically?
Yeah.
Yes, those ones. Yeah, I used to be hooked on those for a bit of time. And I used to make sure I had the there was a morning one. I can't remember what it was called now, but I know it was like a yellow kind of. Yeah, where it had the sun on it, and there was an evening one which had the moon on it, and I was religiously like having the morning one and then having the evening one. Yeah, there you go. It looks lovely. So there was a lovely blue decoration with a moon on it. Cool. Okay, excellent. We'll map that one then. So you are currently in Essex, which is my home county, so not too far away from where you are, in a town called Rayleigh. And if people don't know where that may be, then they may have instead have heard of Southend-on-Sea, which is a popular seaside resort that's about 20 to 25 miles east of the centre of London. So then, Hina, have you lived in Rayleigh all your life, or that area all your life? Or
no, Rayleigh's been 13 years. South Essex has been 20-something years, 21 years. Before that, North London, not including university days, obviously, because that was in Salford. But I'm a Londoner, really. Born and bred Northwest London. So, yeah.
So what part of London?
Edgware.
Okay.
Yes, end of the Northern Line is where I grew up.
I can't believe it. This is completely accidental, everybody. If I'm lucky enough to have regular listeners, right, they are going to recognise that you're now the third guest I've had in a short space of time that have either lived or are living along the Northern Line. So we've had our first guest, Glynis, who is at the end of the other end of the Northern Line in Morden. Then we had Katie Walter, who's in Tooting, and then yourself in Edgware. So that's really. I tell you what, I'm going to make it my. We should have that as a subplot for this podcast to try and get someone at each stop of the Northern Line. I think at this rate. So how does
each branch? Yeah.
Now I'm gonna. I mean, I know myself because I know the area quite well. North London, kind of southwest Essex. Myself being from Harlow in Essex, so I'm gonna kind of play devil's advocate here. Surely kind of northwest London, the Edgware area, and then coming out towards Southend, surely it just all looks the same, isn't it? It's all the kind of same landscape. They're all satellite images that have been swallowed up by London's urban sprawl or something. Or can you actually tell us, is there actually a more distinctness between these two areas that you've noticed?
Yeah, I think there is. I think some of it's in the roads and just people driving and things like that you notice. But yeah, there is. I think Rayleigh, maybe not so much Southend Centre, but Rayleigh itself is sort of outside of the main conurbation bit of Southend. So conurbation really, sort of sprawl. And it does feel more, not countryside, but more town feeling than London, which is a city. So I think there's more identity of local area here, whereas Edgware, Burntyrk, Harrow, all those bits of London can just join together and become one big block of place. So, they're very different in terms of the makeup of people and just life every day. I mean, you notice a Sunday in this part of the world, whereas in London, you don't notice a Sunday particularly because everything just carries on like it does every other day of the week. So yeah, I do think there is a difference. You do sort of feel different. You know, Essex has got its own feel about it that's different to London. And I know people that live on the East London, Essex border bit, which could count as both, have their own feelings about whether it should be part of London or Essex.
Like Romford,
yeah, exactly, and Epping and places like that.
Yeah, my mum's from Epping, and we don't really know whether she's a Londoner or just an Essex girl. So
exactly,
exactly, and it's what's really interesting about places like London to me. I mean, you mentioned East London. You got Upminster, Hornchurch, Dagenham, Ilford, Barking, and they all were villages or small towns themselves before London grew out into them and then kind of swallowed them up. And then when I used to kind of go around those areas for visiting family and friends, things like that, it's like you're right. It's unless you live there, you can't really tell the difference between one place and the next. And I know that if anyone from Dagenham is listening, or Rainham is listening, or Ilford is listening, going, we have our own distinct little thing going on. So this is why I want more people to come on the show, of course. But yeah, then when I go and look at the map and I look at the Southend and Rayleigh area, I mean, you've got Basildon. I had friends in Basildon, and but you've got. It's really interesting that they almost are connecting together, like Basildon and Wickford and Rayleigh and Hockley, and they're almost, but they've got just enough of a green kind of halo around them. Do you make a use of that green space quite a lot? Do you think that green space has prominence? Is it quite clear that you're out of London, that respect?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there is so much green space around here. It's ridiculous. You can go to a different woodland or different green space every weekend for weeks and not go back to the same one. There's this thing called the Saffron Trail, which leads from Shoebury all the way, I think it goes as far as Chelmsford, but you basically can go through green spaces all the way, whether it be woodland or along the coast or whatever it might be. But yeah, open space. It's ridiculous how long it is. But yeah, there is so much green space. But apparently Rochford as a district, which is what Rayleigh's in, has one of the lowest in terms of number of trees compared to other, like there's places in London with more trees.
Really?
But I think it's because if you look at proportion, there's a lot of fields and there's farms. So therefore that sort of counts out the woodland part. But you don't feel like it's very green around here. No. And we discovered places quite close to us during first lockdown that we didn't know existed. You're like, how have we lived here for this long and not known they were there? So yeah, lots and lots of green space. And there's all the whole extra developments being built and lots of people complaining and going, hands off our green belt. A lot of that going on around here at the moment.
Yeah, and that's interesting you mentioned because we actually mentioned, Dan Raven Ellison. Again, that's the second shout out to you now, Dan. Third time you have to come on the show. It's obligatory. And where we talked about London National Park City. I honestly forgotten what guest it was we talked to about. No, it was with Katie Water actually, because she's now a ranger for London National Park City. And the other thing that Dan's done, of course, is the project led is the slowways. So as soon as you were talking about like walking all the way up to Chelmsford and things like that, and I was thinking now of the slowways kind of thing, and that'll be something we could probably talk about another time. But how do you feel inside though? Do you feel like you still feel like an Edgware person, or are you now definitely like kind of out there in the Essex? How do you feel? Does your sense of identity link to your sense of place, do you think?
I think it's both still, because when I go back, I'm home still. Not that I've been back for a while, but yeah, it's still home. But it's very different because the ethnic makeups are very different, diversity-wise. So, I go home to Edgware and it's more what I've grown up with. So therefore, I feel like I fit in some ways there, and in other ways, I'm definitely part of the Rayleigh furniture now, kind of thing. Been here for so long, know people all over the place. So, yeah, I would still say it was a bit of both. It's like when you go to university and you go north, and like you're still always going to be a southerner, even though you're north, and you come back and everyone's like, you've still got you picked up a bit of a northern accent, not southern anymore. You don't fit in anywhere properly.
You go as far north as Salford, yeah. Did you get othered quite a bit while you was up in Salford? Like, you're definitely a southerner. Did you get that a lot?
I mean, there were other southerners there, but it was definitely a thing, yes. Definitely a thing.
See, for me, Norwich is as far north as I went in terms of living and stuff like that. Crikey, I do feel out of place when I go up to things like Manchester, or even to see friends up in Edinburgh and things like that. But it's fun. It's fun, but you definitely look around and think, I feel so out of place here. I'm just southerner through and through. So that's fantastic. Cool. I mean, yeah, well, when I did live in Essex myself, I was too young to appreciate getting out and about, and Harlow being this new town which had been built around green space and satellite neighbourhoods and things like that. I was spoilt that I didn't really need to leave that town in order to get my green space feel, but and then the odd jaunt down to Epping Forest and stuff like that. So I never really got to see the Essex countryside, to be honest. In fact, I've seen far, far less of the Essex countryside than I have of the Suffolk and Norfolk countryside. So it's such a shame. So what we'll have to do, Hina, I'll have to come down with the family, and we'll have to go out for a little jaunt, a little walk.
Definitely.
Cool. Sticking to your location then. So we call this little segment Spill the Beans, because you've got to tell us all about this. Right, so here's the beans being spilled. Ooh. So, you do ballet classes in a village just up the road, I believe.
Yeah, well, it's in Rayleigh still.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I do ballet. So I'm really unfit. Like, I'm not very good with exercise. I don't go to the gym. I can't be doing any of that stuff. I can't run. So I thought, I've got to do something. And my daughter's dance school a few years ago said, we're going to start adult ballet. For complete beginners, that's fine. Or you can be a bit more experienced, whatever. It doesn't matter. Anyone can come. I'm like, I'm going to try it. If both the girls are doing ballet, I've got to have a go. Anyway, so I went along. I said, I'm rubbish. I've got no flexibility. I'm really unfit, but I'd like to give it a go. And they were like, come and try it because you won't be the only one. I went, and it's a class, started. There were some people who've been doing it for ages. I'm like, oh my goodness. Anyway, started it, and I just thought, I love this. I've actually got into it. I thought some of it's really hard, and honestly, oh my gosh, did I hurt the next day and the day after, my thighs particularly. But I just thought, yeah, I like this. I can do this. I'll never perform in front of anybody, but I feel like I'm exercising. Now, obviously, the last year and a half or whatever, I've not done that much of it for obvious reasons. We've done a bit on Zoom, but it's not the same. But yeah, it's just so nice to do something that I never, ever thought I would try. And it's got to my 40s before I've tried it, but I've actually really like it. And now when my girls are trying to practice for stuff and they're talking about different positions and different moves that they do in ballet, I know what they're talking about, which is great. But for me, it's my only form of regular exercise, although it hasn't been. Starting again next week. I can't wait. And now one of my really good friends is doing it with me as well, which is even better. And it's just a little bit of fun. But it's really important to sort of exercise. So I don't do any, and that's my way of doing it. If I say to people, like, give you 3 things, which one might not be true about me, everyone's always going to say, yeah, don't do ballet, because I haven't got a ballet body or anything. Aww. Outside your comfort zone, doing something outside your comfort zone is really important. I couldn't jump off a zip wire, but I went to ballet classes and I could do that. And it was totally out of my comfort zone, but I liked it.
And it's fantastic you're going to have a friend come along as well, because then it's rebuilding the social aspect of it as well, which is fantastic, which is we're all dying for at the moment, as we slowly get back to a new normal of some kind. And is ballet one of those things where when you watch it on TV, I mean, one of my favourite noir movies is Black Swan with Natalie Portman, and I was like, but when I watch that kind of stuff, or we watch kind of performances and stuff like that, I never get like a real true sense of like the skill, the technicality of. I mean, I know there is that there, and that I could never do it. But is it like when you do it yourself, do you have like a whole new level of appreciation of what these people do?
Yeah. Do you know what? I get the technical so well. I can't execute it every time at all, but I get it. So, when they're like, your leg or your knees do this, or this is what your muscles are doing to make that move or whatever, I totally understand it in my head. It all works perfectly. Try and put it like grand jetés. I've got a thing with the grand jeté that I just cannot do it. And, it is sort of just, I can understand the process behind it. And there's lots of process, but yeah, I can't execute.
What is a grand jeté then? What is that?
It's a leap, but then you sort of swap legs as you leap in the air and you land on the different legs of one you've come off with. Yeah,
I can picture it on my head. It sounds like it's one of the classic moves kind of thing. The only one I remember is plie, which is like the kind of dainty.
Yeah, plies are easy. You can do plies. But I'm not very bendy, so I can't go very low down on plie. And pirouettes, I know exactly how to do a pirouette. I can sort of do one. But I can't do the head spin and keep your head in the right place and all that stuff, and the knee out to the side and everything else. There's so much going on. Honestly, I think the people that do ballet on a regular basis, they must hurt a lot, because like what you got to do to your body to keep that going is crazy.
Rediscovering muscles you've forgotten you had or something.
Yeah. So next Thursday I will be aching because I haven't done it for so long, and I'll be going Wednesday night. because adults are allowed to do that kind of thing again now.
But I can tell in your voice that you're looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Right, so I'm going to go from Southend to Shanghai now, because let's go back and talk a little bit about some geography now. And this little segment is called Jog Your Memory. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk about a geographical kind of moment in time, a significant a piece of history or something. And I know you know the answer because you've talked about it so many times, but people who maybe not know the answer can guess of the year that this significant event took place. So what we've all heard, so what's today? Today's the 1st of June. People are probably hearing this at the end of July, start of August, but yesterday, the 31st of May, we were all, I wouldn't say blown over, because I think us as geographers knew this was coming or had seen this coming a long time ago. But there was a significant moment in an ongoing historical event which was reported by media outlets across the world, and that was that China had announced that it would allow couples to have up to 3 children after census data showed a steep decline in birth rates. And everyone who may be aware of it, of course, we're referring to the infamous one-child policy and their population control. Now, we as geographers, Hina, kind of saw this coming, didn't we? Because one thing we've taught quite a fair bit in schools is the consequences of population control, of forced population control and efforts to do that kind of stuff. What's your take on what's this news about China relaxing their rules? Well, going completely the opposite direction, saying, no, we want to encourage you to have children now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because they've gone to 2. And then because I've seen the stories recently about the fact that you've got people don't want to have lots of children because the grandparents generally are looking after those children while the parents are working, and they're getting older, and they're like, well, because obviously they delayed when you could have children, didn't they, as well? So families are older and they're struggling to cope with one grandchild. So, actually having more is actually going to cause more strain on family life in general. So that whole social norm of having the larger families gone from China already. So when they were like, we're going to try and get 3, well, yeah, their population is declining, especially in the cities. So it was the natural order of things that we're going to go that way, because China is still communist to a certain extent. So they're still trying to have some of that control. I don't think they're going to succeed. I don't think people are going to have 3 children. It's just not going to happen. They're barely having 2 at the moment. So, I just find it's always been when I've liked teaching, but it's so important to give the before story and the what's happened since story. So you've got to explain why they needed the one-child policy in the first place, and the run up to the whole let's get everyone off the farms and into the industry and all the rest of it. And the Cultural Revolution. You need to have a little bit of that background. And the other thing, we always talk about danger of a single story, but this is the opposite. This is a single story. Only China have ever done this. You cannot, as a student, say this country needs to put one-child policy in, because it's not going to work anywhere else in the whole world. So it is where we've always gone, be careful of a single story. In this particular case, it is a single story. And I think you have to keep up to date with it, because I think there are still people teaching it, going, this is what China are doing, and haven't done any of the developments, which is quite scary. So, yeah, I think it was a natural order for the way China was going to go, but it's not going to work, I don't think.
I was going to mention this later, but this is a perfect time to mention this because of what you just said. So, yeah, so the issue is like a single issue which is taking place, and that you're trying to implement that over 1 billion of people, which is, we know that there's variations in the rule, like in the rural areas. I mean, the one-child policy is a bit of a misnomer. We know that there were some areas of China where they were allowed to have more than one if their first was a girl, for example, in some parts. But I just want to give a shout out to Victoria Hewitt, Mrs. Humanities, because within that single narrative, you have multiple stories, you have multiple experiences that come into it. And the reason why I mentioned Victoria is because back in 2017, she asked in a tweet about, is there any suggestions for books that give a first-hand account of living in China, with regards to the one-child policy? And I'll put the link into the description of the podcast, but there were some fantastic suggestions that were given, like Catherine Owen, our second guest, suggested something. Mark Enser suggested something of giving these really powerful stories, of how this single blanket thing kind of was affecting all these individuals. And it really does go. I want to come back to talk about the fact that we really want to be important about putting humanity back into humanities and humanity back into geography. So we'll put that just on the back burner and we'll come back to that. But yeah, you mentioned things like the Great Leap Forward and trying to shift rapidly from an agricultural to an industrial, and then that caused all hells of problems and famine and a death rate went, and of course that meant that the birth rate rebounded extensively because of course you have more deaths, more infant mortality, you got more higher births and you can see that in the statistics of this lag of the birth. So China's been trying to play God in that respect. It's creating all these knock-on problems. So, and their birth rate was declining to an extent anyway before this meddling, and it would decline naturally anyway. But as you just said, tell us a little bit more about the natural reasons why birth rates would decline anyway.
Natural reasons, well, as a country develops, I suppose we say, people have more money, the reasons for having children change. And therefore, people are putting their own education, their own careers, etc., before having children. So they're having children later anyway in life, and therefore likely to have fewer of them. It's about the social norms changing, isn't it? And all countries are going through that at different varying levels, but it varies across the country. So, the birth rates will change more rapidly in a city than they will in the countryside, because in the countryside, if you've got a family farm, your incentive for having fewer children isn't quite the same. So those things were always going to change. And I think, they'd pushed in China particularly, they pushed so hard for increasing the birth rate before 1979 that it was always that as long as you stop pushing people, it was naturally going to change anyway. But, it didn't. So, when I'm teaching about birth rates dropping and the difference, we still do DTM a little bit because you've still, I think it's got its uses still, demographic transition model, in case anyone's not sure what I'm talking about. It still has its uses to a certain extent. You've got to critique it, obviously. But, you talk about countries that are supposedly the developed ones, the HICs, high-income countries now, and also going into level 5 of what that is. And I use myself as an example. Well, I chose not to have children until a certain age because I put my career first, and therefore my time for having children is less. So I have fewer of them, potentially. And I sort of use that example. What I do love, though, is talking about why they're now declining further in some countries, and using the example of Japan, which my students find quite amusing. On the idea that men don't, there's this stereotype that Japanese men don't want to be intimate, so birth rate has dropped massively for that reason. And there is a little element of that, and that's quite funny because they pick up on that, and you've got to be careful they don't pick up on little things too much. But there is an element of that in Japan because they have those festivals to try and encourage people to have babies and things. So yeah, I find it a really fascinating topic because, it's not a blanket, this is why things change. And so China's birth rate was definitely going to drop all over the country because its countryside probably wouldn't have done for quite a while yet. But the cities always were going to. And especially if there is a lack of, if people are going into sort of declining circumstances, they are less likely to have children anyway. So that whole Malthusian idea was probably going to come true, whatever, potentially, if you believe that kind of thing. But then technology steps in, doesn't it, and changes things. So,
I mean, whether this comes to pass or not, or whether this is true or not, but I would make an educated guess, an educated prediction that there's huge economic development in China. They are quickly becoming, the richest country in the world. But it's not just that. The spread of wealth. They're very much overheated in the east and those cities in the centre. But they're coming those people are becoming affluent very, very quickly. And naturally, you're right. They will be focusing on their careers. They'll be focusing on. Mostly will be choosing to start families. All those things that you just said, and the incentives to have more children are just not going to override this element that they just want to live like the world of capitalism, the world of consumerism, the world of, of comfort, of luxury. They've gone through this entire demographic process, as you've just said. So you had the little emperor syndrome, which was when not all couples, because I thought that was a single story. It was a bit of a stereotype like that, but you had some families who would have this child which they would spoil because it was their only child. I think there was a bit of an overplay on the little emperor syndrome, but it was a phenomenon. And now you might have maybe the opposite impact, because if couples are encouraged to have 2 or 3 children, but they still want their career, they still want that, and they're quite affluent, there could be this possibility that those 3 children will be put into daycare quite a lot, will be looked after by nannies, and then they probably might not be having that much connection with it. And so again, the society and the culture will change again, when Chinese culture traditionally is very family orientated.
That's the same though, that at the moment, like, you've got a lot of grandparents doing the childcare in the cities, and also the pressure on making sure that your child is academically great, doing extracurricular, doing extra classes. The money's going into that for the people that can afford it. There's almost like that keeping up with other children. You know, Japan was always known for that, you know, pushing their children really hard, going to night school after having been at school and those kind of things. I think China's going that way a little bit in those, obviously not the whole country and not everybody, but in certain people living in cities who can afford to do so and who have got good education themselves are pushing their children to that. So if you then have 2-3 children, you can't afford to do that for all your children. You know, it gets expensive. I know, like, my 2 dancing 6 days a week between them is freaking expensive. So you can imagine, you know, it's just not something you want to have to do with all your children. So I just think social norms have changed, and it is just, you know, we're talking about, you know, you look at things like gender inequality and things like that across the world in various places. One of the reasons that it's allowed to happen is because of social norms. As soon as those social norms change, they're generally not going to change back, and they take a long time to change. So the countries where, you know, the idea of large families is now dropping. I mean, Bangladesh, the way that Bangladesh have changed their birth rate was amazing, in the way it was small scale and seems to have worked really, really well. They're not going to go backwards on that, because now the norm is to have small families on the whole. Not everybody, obviously, but those changes are important. But China can't just go, well, we're now saying everyone have 3, so everyone's going to go, okay, we'll have 3, unless you chuck loads of money at them. And I don't think they're going to do that.
Well, this is a really interesting thing. And anybody listening, if you've got strong connections to China, Japan, Bangladesh, you know, this podcast is for you, and it'll be absolutely wonderful to get your perspective and your insight into from the actual locations that these are taking place, because we're just pundits and commentators really on this side of the world, as typical Westerners like to do. Okay, yeah, I know you know the answer, but we'll ask you anyway, because it's part of the thing. So then, we know that the one-child policy was ditched, kind of sort of became a 2-child policy in 2016, and 2021 we now have a 3-child policy, if we're going to call it that. But Hina, when did the 1-child policy come into effect?
1979.
Yeah. So that was, you probably would have the easiest one, I think, out of all of the Jog Your Memories. So I just want to go back to the one thing that I said a bit before, is that this whole, thinking about Victoria's tweet about trying to get those stories into thing. One thing that I used to love teaching, I've mentioned this in a podcast episode previously, so I won't go too detailed in this, but I used to love teach about plate tectonics and volcanoes and earthquakes. But I really got quite dismayed that the kids really focused on the whiz-bang element, the fantastic, the great footage and stuff like that. Almost treating it like it was an Avengers movie rather than a bleeding geography thing. And so I tried to bring in a human element into it by telling stories of like real victims or rescue workers and things like that. And, I had kids in tears at one point because they realised that this was a tragic thing which was decimating people's lives. So have you had, it doesn't have to be about geography, it could be something you've taught about, but has there been an occasion where you've picked up someone's story or a group of people's stories which has brought the humanity into something that was lacking? Like, and it could have been a geography lesson, or it could be just something that in your walk of life. Yeah,
I mean, with geography, there's quite a few of the charity websites like UNICEF. I mean, I've done a lot of work with UNICEF Rights Respect in Schools and Save the Children and things like that. They do take that aspect really, really well. So when climate change, when we started really sort of going into depth on it quite a few years ago now, 7-8 years ago, UNICEF did a whole pack of things on impact of climate change on children and taking children from remote, like Vanuatu and places like that, and giving their stories. And this is how they're going to be impacted on. And I think that was sort of the starting point of really thinking about it on such a small scale. of individual children, and like, well, this individual child, we can name them, here's a picture of them, this is what's happening to them, this is their story behind this. There was a really good one when they were looking at refugee children and children in conflict, and they had a Syrian girl, and she'd sort of drawn a cartoon of her life, if you remember that one. And again, very real. It was a child she'd drawn. This is what my house was like, exactly like a lot of houses the children were teaching live in, and this is what happened to my house, and this is what's happening to me now. And yeah, I just don't think, I think, when they see it on their level, it's really, really important sort of to understand it from there. And as a tutor, I always say to my tutor group, you don't know what people are going through, so you've always got to be kind. And when we do Thought for the Weeks, which is something we do in my school, like on a weekly thing, I always try and make that an empathy thing, link it to somebody that they might know. Now, I've got children in my tutor group who are in care, and I would never say to them, this has happened to this child in this room, but I will say, you all know somebody, I'm not going to mention any names, but there's people that have gone through this, not saying exactly what they've been through, but trauma, etc. So yeah, I think it's really important to bring it down to their level. It's not just something that happens to someone somewhere else, or if it does, here's a face, here's how it would affect them. Imagine you were in that position. We've got to do more of that.
There could be people listening thinking, well, isn't this just another kind of woke thing where you're just trying to teach kids that they're privileged and they don't have, and that was the pushback, like some elements calling people snowflakes. But I think it's all for the better. I mean, more people are talking about mental health now. More people are opening up about, issues that they have. It's not a bad thing. So, and it's done, as you said, Hina, in a really positive way through schools, and geography is a fantastic vehicle for that.
And we're not trying to be, the thing is, like, where we live in a privileged society, we're not going, we want to be the saviours. One of my year 13s talking to her, she wants to go on to university at some point, probably, but she's sort of changing her mind a little bit. She's going to go for a gap year. I said, what are you going to do? She said, I'm not sure yet. She said, I'd like to go and travel, and I'd like to do some sort of charity work, but I'm mindful of the fact, and she said her own words, I don't want to do that thing where you go somewhere and you build a school when they've got no teachers to work in that school or equipment to use in that school. There's this thing about being a white saviour, and I'm not going to go and do that because that's silly. I need to find the right kind of charity. Maybe I do go and teach in somewhere for a little while, or do something like that where I'm actually going to be useful, and I'm not just doing it as a token, here's something we're going to give you because we can, but actually it's going to be no use to at all. So just hearing that from a student you've taught for a couple of years, it's just amazing. Like, yeah, absolutely, that's exactly what we're thinking. And it's about having the empathy and understanding what can be done to change things without going, we're the ones that have to change it. I don't know if you've seen, it was a few years old now, there's a Save the Children 1 minute, life in a minute thing of basically a child in the UK as if war was starting here.
That was very powerful.
And that was, I remember showing that to classes and there just being complete silence and shock afterwards, because you're like, never thought of it like that. And it is exactly that. Normal life, this is how your life can change if that happened. Now, that never should happen here, but that's what's happened in countries around the world. And to give them that, it's a shock factor. Yes, it is, but it's putting it in their context, because otherwise it's just stuff that happens to other people, which it is, but they need to understand the impact it can have without thinking everything's wonderful for us and we can go and save them, because it's not like that.
Yeah, it's a very, very important point you made there. And kudos to that student as well. That we would say that, look, when we work with young people, this is what we know they can be. They are, there's the stereotype of teenagers and young people and things like that, but we know that they can be very thoughtful, very, very kind about what they do, and that's the vast majority of the time. So that's one of the reasons why we do what we do. So thank you for that, Hina. So we're going to come to a close now, because we're running out of time, and we're going to finish off with what we do every time we finish off, which is something called We Are All Geographers, and that is where we try to connect one guest to another. And the previous guest, we had the fabulous Helen Young, or better known as the Geography Geek, came on last time. And she was challenged by the guest before that, Dr. Hannah Bloomfield, with the word trampoline to link it to geography. She just wanted to be completely random, and she was. Helen smashed it, like completely. Didn't take a hammer and mallet and smash the trampoline. She perfectly did, you can probably guess, the different components, globalization, all that kind of stuff, and then where the metals are coming from. Boom, done. Now, Helen has come up with a really interesting word for you, Hina, that you've got 30 seconds to try and link to geography, right? And that word is the paranormal? Can you link the paranormal to geography? Would you like a little bit of time to think about it, or do you want to crack on with your 30 seconds?
Okay. Yeah, I'll crack on, I think.
So, on your marks, 30 seconds, Hina, to link paranormal to geography. Go.
Okay, so location, so where paranormal activity has been seen or has been sensed. So, you've got like area, whatever it's called in America. You've got those different locations, so they're going to be linked to something. So it could be linked to mining or mountains or rivers or something about people and location and population, which means that they're more likely to happen in some areas than others. So I think geographically, if there is paranormal activity, it's going to be based on geographical features, whether it be human or physical, that happen around the world.
Yeah, okay. That's not a bad attempt. That's quite good. That's a tricky one, isn't it? I think Helen set up the right one there. Yeah, and I was thinking, when I was trying to come up with some things like this, I was thinking about, as a meteorologist, like weather, lenticular clouds, for example, that look like UFOs.
Oh, yeah.
People have mistaken that concept, even weather balloons as UFOs and stuff like that. You're absolutely right. You were talking about Area 51 there, and what was that statistic we saw, that like the number of UFO sightings always seemed to go up around about 11, 12, 1 o'clock at night. It was because of people like leaving bars and being drunk and thinking they're seeing something like that. But anyway, it's really
Well, the reason that came into my head was because of, I don't know if you've seen, there's this program called Resident Alien. It was a Sky show. And the beautiful setting that was in with the mountains, and he'd landed in the mountains. It was absolutely gorgeous. And that's what triggered the whole geography thing, because it was just beautiful. Yeah. So it's a funny program, but it was a setting, was just amazing.
The only alien landing in the mountains that matters is first contact with the Vulcans in 2063. Bozeman, Montana. Anyway, so Helen got you paranormal, and I think you did quite a good job there. You've got to come up with a word for our next guest. What are you going to go for?
Oh, that's tricky, isn't it? The word that's coming into my head, which I don't know if it's any use or not, is discombobulated, and I have no idea why that is in my head.
Oh, I think you should go with that.
Yeah, that's the word in my head for some weird reason, so let's go with that.
Oh, okay, right. Discombobulated. This is just getting more random. Right, okay, before we lose ourselves, come on, give me some shout-outs. Anyone you want to give a shout-out to?
Well, geography community. We've mentioned Rob before, but I think Rob Chambers was one of the first people I sort of connected with on Twitter and sort of helped me out with a few little things. And I just think he's quietly brilliant. He's not one of the people that shouts about stuff and, has a big presence all the time. But he just seems to having met him in the Wonder Rooms, he seems like such a fab guy. And I'm a bit disappointed that next year I'm not going to be doing the same specs as he is, because I'm going to have to find other ways to keep in contact with him. But I just think he's absolutely fabulous. And another shout out to someone who may or may not listen to this, depending on whether I give her the link or not. It's my colleague Anna Edwards, who I've worked with for many, many years now, and I absolutely love her. And she's kept me really sane this year, particularly. But she's always been there, and she's brilliant. And she's an amazing geographer as well. She doesn't do Twitter and all that kind of thing, but she is an amazing geographer and an amazing all-round person. So, those are the two that I would go
Awesome. With. And for people looking to expand their geography community, how can they find you on social media?
So I'm at RoboJog on Twitter. I think that's about the only place you can find me.
RoboJog, so it's ROBBO, Jog.
Yeah, Jog. Yep. And obviously be more part of the GA as of September, so I'll be contactable that way as well, which I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, that's really awesome, and congratulations for that post.
Thank you.
So well done. Well, thank you so much, Hina. I really enjoyed our chat, and I know we will chat more because we chat quite a lot another time, and I will speak to you soon. Thank you, Hina.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you had fun. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe so more stories and experiences can drop into your favourite podcast app. If you fancy being a guest or have any feedback, follow us on Twitter at CoffeeGeogPod and send us a DM. Or you could email coffeeandjog@geogramblings.com. Until next time, keep geogging.